Welcome to episode 2 of the How We Rise podcast. I'm your host, Martina. Today we delve into the incredible life journey of Vicky. From an Eastern European Transylvanian Czech family, her life has been a testament to the human spirit's capacity to endure and overcome. She has survived a war, faced the battle of cancer, been held up at gunpoint, and so much more. Her story is one of grit, determination, and unwavering hope. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by Vicky's incredible journey. This is How We Rise. How long have you been in London for?
It's adding up 7.5 years.
And how are you finding it?
It's wonderful and terrible. It's a city of such extraordinary contrasts, and it is endlessly fascinating, but not always what it could be for communities, for individuals, and the housing and things like that are particularly in your face in London. The discrepancies, the inequalities, the lack of opportunities, and the cuts in services in a very shocking way that we live in such a rich country that has these devastating impacts on people who just are out of luck.
I read that you were, I noticed that you said that you were an activist.
Yes, I started in 1965, so it's been a bit of a life habit that I can't kick. And there's so many different ways now that you're able to be active that I thought it was rather excellent that I was still able to be involved when I was shielding. I thought that just showed you how much things have moved on. In the old days, if you weren't there, you were not involved, and now you can be there in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. When you say that you're an activist, what does that actually mean for you? Because I know obviously you can be an activist for many different things. So is there something that you specifically are advocating for, or is it just general? Is it something generalized?
I think these days it comes under the banner of social justice and
Okay.
equalities, neither of which we've begun to achieve in most of the parts of the world. But again, in what is the prosperous West or Northern Hemisphere, where we plundered and robbed people blind and built our wealth on the backs of others, it's particularly grieving that I'm in some cases fighting the same battles I fought in 1965. In other cases, it's worse because they've been added to by in different governments and people's reluctance now to become involved in collective action. I was walking to school and I used to pass some embassies on the walk, and I was 12, and one of the embassies I passed was there was a small group of people in front of the building holding placards, and it was about peace, because in 65 it was only 20 years after the World War II had finished, and there was still an awful lot of interest in developing nuclear weaponry and arming all sorts of countries to the teeth. So I picked up a placard and joined them and walked around in a circle. And the next embassy that I passed within the same week was the German embassy, where people were protesting a proposed law that would exonerate all the Nazi criminals that had been caught in the post-war period. So it was an amnesty law that a certain lobby in Germany wanted to pass, and that was just so blatantly outrageous that again I picked up a sign and joined them.
How old were you when you did this?
12.
Wow. The reason why I ask you what provoked you to join in is because I don't think that would be sort of like the general feeling of a 12-year-old, especially to do that. So do you think that it was almost innate in you to do that? Do you think it
I
was instinct?
I think I was always curious about how other people lived and experienced their lives and their circumstances, because mine were a little bit a odd at odds with everything I saw around me and all the people I met at school. But I also uh, understood that one person alone doesn't make a difference, and therefore
Mm,
you're looking for like-minded people. I understood it was a civil rights time, Tina, and
mhm,
although I was in French Canada, we were so aware of Vietnam, the Vietnam War, and the toll that that took on so many people. It's almost possible to quantify. Napalm bombing Cambodia and Laos, why when the war was in Vietnam, South and North, but also civil rights, because if you think 1965, Martin Luther King had been assassinated, very John F. Kennedy, which wasn't going to make the sort of differences I was interested in, but Malcolm X, some of the key people were either dead or under that type of threat and menace. So if you were open to learning a little bit about the bigger picture, then you couldn't help but pick up these trends and think, ooh, well, I don't have any money and I am a child, but I wonder if there's something I can do.
Okay. So it was sort of, so are you saying that it was the general thing at the time? Because the
No, it
times,
wasn't a general thing at all. I don't really ever meet anybody just like me. Now that I'm old, it's different. We've all sort of mellowed into a kind of a bland, a
mm,
unified imagery. But in the oh no no, I was always on my own. I was on my own anyway, an awful lot, and no, it never occurred to me that I needed to check what other people were doing or get permission or uh, worry worry about being seen or something like that just never crossed my mind. So I guess I was very lucky in being confident and independent. And I was also silly little things, Tina. I was tall. I was taller than I am now. I shrunk. And that meant that although I probably had a baby face and probably spoke like a child, I didn't look automatically physiologically like a child. It was only when people got up close to me that they realized. Uh,
yeah.
there was there was that, but there was one other thing that got under my skin in those years, and that was Biafra, when an entire population had been willfully and determinedly starved, and there was something that seeped into my conscience and subconscious about that. So I read a lot. I read perhaps ridiculous partly because I was on my own so much. And so a lot of these things came through that. James Baldwin, oh my goodness, I was totally caught up in every word that he ever wrote.
Seems like you were just drawn to that from very young, and it was almost like that was the path,
Well, I
that
was
you
in
were
a
go down.
privileged position because nobody was shooting at me. Nobody was
Mm,
going to take away my education, or I started working that year as well, my job, because I'd expressed my empathy with a struggle, a contemporary struggle. There were people like Joan Baez and various other people who were quite inspirational around that time. And you also felt a little bit like, well, if they can take the risk, because it was a genuine possibility of them losing everything. Um, well, I was so protected. I was so safe in
mm.
so many ways. Then how could I not go for it?
Wow, I love just hearing the mentality of you knew, okay, I have this protection. So if anything, I'm actually probably a really good person to do this. Like for you to have those conscious thoughts. And yeah, but that's really amazing that you're still doing it today.
Well, it might not be as noble as it sounds, but it
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
nice way to express it. I think I might be giving myself far too much credit for this. But today, the scene of protest and activism is different, and arguably now has brought in more risks because of the government's determination to squelch free
Mhm.
speech and protests. So isn't that curious that we've gone from 65, where of course people in other locations and circumstances suffered horrifically for expressing themselves, but I didn't. And I knew that I had a little bubble around me of protection for all the obvious reasons. And
Yeah.
now, yeah, now none of us have the bubble. We're not going to lose our lives, but we do have quite a lot that we could lose. So we have to think through what is effective. We're also not able to burn candles at all the ends simultaneously. You're young, you can still do it,
Yeah.
but some of us have reached the point where we have to be very frank and say, no, I can't be a hyperactivist. I have to be an activist on a different level with different tactics and strategies and see how I can use my finite energy for the best.
Can you share a pivotal moment in your life that significantly shaped who you are today?
I probably had quite a number of revelations and road to Damascus
Mhm.
moments. I don't know that I can pin them all down, but I think one of them was when I realized that um, solitary as aspects of my life were as a child, and as much as people were very positive about me and suggesting that um, I was a great. I wasn't great. I was just one of the human race, and everything had to be seen through the prism of not only other people but the greater good. So um, the fact that we didn't have the phrase white privilege, but
Mhm.
we were able to see, especially during the late 60s and the hippie era, we were able to see just how incredibly self-indulgent and luxurious it was to be able to dabble in all those things without devastating
Mhm.
destruction of our future lives and choices. So it was something about the awareness that it wasn't just me in this world. There were
Yeah.
not of people, and we all needed to somehow be fed and housed and get through our different challenges and circumstances. And I didn't have to look after anybody, which people sometimes in disordered or dysfunctional family units or origins have a burden to start with, even as very young children, where
Mhm.
they can't make decisions for themselves. And again, the fact that I could even get a job at the age of 12 and start to save for my own education, and I emancipated myself, which was very simple. In those days, you'd have to jump through all kinds of regulatory and legal hoops now, a lot of things. And I now am able to think, wow, that will never happen again. You can just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to handwrite a letter from emancipation, and it will have to be taken seriously. And it was. So that was nice, because although I wasn't responsible for people, I felt a certain responsibility towards both my biological and my foster people. And it just didn't mean I stopped caring. It meant that I stopped stopping myself because of that care, and realized there were lots of different ways just to be loving and supportive of them without kind of putting myself in perpetual stasis.
You're so aware, Vicky. I listen to you talking. You're so aware of everything around you and what it is. And so when who was it that told you that you were great? I remember you said that you know that.
Biological and foster. They were just they weren't able to cope with their own lives, but they were very uh, generous and loving towards me. They just didn't know what to do with me and didn't know what to do with themselves. So they were up against all sorts of pretty heavy adversity, more than I've ever experienced. But I've learned a lot by listening to people. I've had to learn to listen, because I quite typically from someone who is from the culture that I went to school in, not the culture that I represent, but the culture I went to school in and so on. Quite often we're just get this habit of we're talking and people want to listen. And it took me a number of decades to really get the hang of listening, and not putting my own interpretation on things. And that has made a difference in how I'm able to process some of the realities of other people's lives. I have always been someone that people talk a little bit too openly to, because I've sounded foreign everywhere I've been, and people, they'll never see me again. So I'm a bit like the confessional. They think this is all sacred, and when I turn up at the same bus stop the next day, they're horrified. It's a bit like people who, I don't drink, but people who drink, and they start telling you really inappropriate things in vino veritas. Well, luckily, most of them don't remember that their blotto after that. But if they remember and they see you and see you have this particular facial expression, which is, oh no, I'm gonna have to kill her or myself because she
Yes.
knows too much.
Well,
But because that is my experience. Again, I've tried to respect it. Those are real people with real, sometimes very screwy thoughts, and
yeah.
sometimes very, very lacking in insight. But hey, I've been privileged, honored, or cursed, with them wanting to share something. So let me at least listen, pick up something in that thread that they're throwing all about, and fairly cavalierly.
I know, but I'm listening to you, and I think that as much as you like to listen, you're a great talker. I could listen to you for hours. The way you present yourself, the way you talk, absolutely. I think that I understand that, from your culture, and it's people are used to you speaking and saying loads of things, but I think it's your gift almost, because you speak so well, and it's not everybody that everybody wants to listen to sometimes. But I could listen to you talk for hours and hours and hours.
Well,
Hours.
I'm blushing. I guess you can't
Yes.
see that on a podcast.
Yes, well, I can see you, Vicky. Who do you think has been the most, or who has been the most influential person in your life? And what impact did they have on you?
Everybody's had an impact.
Hmm.
Someone asked me uh, unexpectedly a couple of months ago if I'd um, met people who inspired me, who fired me up. And I said, well, again, I guess the luck I've had that people may not have again, is that I was near enough Nelson Mandela to see the pores on his face, and I named my youngest son Mandela. I was able to be in a small group with Paulo Freire, the man who developed the pedagogy of the oppressed. I was so near to Ivan Illich, somebody who I was fascinated by, that he actually tapped me on the knee to make a point. And Miriam Makeba, oh, just a stunning human being. Not that long before she died, she did one more tour and gave a live performance, but she kept interrupting herself and talking, which is, of course, what I was craving, because what a life she had led. And on and on, but that's just a flavor. I am involved in politics, and I support um, Cuba and its right to get on with itself, its sovereignty. And I am chair of, previously, the group in Scotland, and now a group in North and South London. And wow, I met Che Guevara's sister. I interpreted and translated for Che Guevara's daughter, and a few other people. And that is the kind of thing that I can't help but feel I've just had a big hug from humanity when I
Yeah.
reflect on that. That's not bragging or name dropping. Now that I do supporting artist work for fun, for adventure in my retirement, I obviously end up on sometimes on filming bits with people who are famous celebrities, and
Yeah.
that just isn't what I'm after. And so people sort
Yeah.
of say, but what was he like? I'm kind of going, I didn't even know who it was. I don't watch television. Somebody had to point out to me that I was in show, and I just happened to be in close proximity. Sometimes you don't ever get on to the in front of the camera. So it's all just very irrelevant and silly and fun, really good fun. Anyway, but those people, yeah, Joan Baez, I got to hold her guitar and
Yeah.
she was tuning up in an event that I was helping at in New York because I worked briefly for Amnesty International, unpaid at the United Nations in New York. That was very exciting. And Joan Baez came to play and at this fundraiser we had, and I was the only person. I was doing a sort of welcoming role in the nave of the church, and the acoustics. Or she said, "Oh, do you mind if I do a couple of tunes and tune up here? I won't be bothering you." I'm kind of going, "Oh, you won't be bothering? Oh my gosh!" And
Yes, yeah.
there it was. I had a private concert by Joan Baez. What more can I ask for?
Wow. Okay. So would you say in that moment you were a little bit starstruck?
No, I was just literally warm to the cockles of my heart. It just felt
Okay.
so
Yeah.
so
Mm.
good to be there. And that is, of course, the thing sometimes you don't learn until quite late on in life to really enjoy the moment, to really feel
Ah, that's what it was.
that
Yeah.
you're there. We rush around and we raised a lot of children. I always had more than one job. I was always on tight deadlines. I had massive lists of things that I was getting through running a home, as well as the jobs, as well as the politics. And yeah, took quite a bit of time to uh, have that moment where you go, oh, this is happening now, and I'm here, and I
Mm,
might never be again. And it might not be of interest to anybody else, but it sure as heck is great interest to me.
you
And just
enjoyed that moment.
just appreciating it. Oh, totally.
And you do all of this as well as having raising children, and now you have grandchildren as well. And I'm sure obviously things have, slowed down for you as you've got older in terms of your busyness, but you're doing all of that and also doing all of that as well.
Busyness actually would have been kept up at a strong pace, but health, unfortunately, ask any old person about their health, and you're likely to get quite an earful. And that's really what so many of my friends and comrades are experiencing now. They just don't have the resilience and the stamina. Time has caught up with them. So that's where, as I say, we do more things from home. We strategize, we try and mentor people and support them in different ways. And think about the things that you were involved in, what worked and what didn't work, because we also have to be frank. We haven't saved the world. As Buffy's epitaph said, she saved the world a lot. And there's such rich humor in that statement, because that's what it feels like. Of course, we haven't really achieved any of our original um, passionate goals. And of course, when we were in that peace and love generation bit, we thought it would really catch on. Well, we were nincompoops, weren't we? So we need to also be very self-critical and recognize that it was great that we put so much energy and sometimes humor and enthusiasm into all those, but not one of them. I mean, I always call myself the patron saint of lost causes.
Mm, mm,
There's been moments where you think, oh, victory, but they're fleeting because the way the world works is
mhm,
that for everything that you think is going to help people and be positive and progressive, there's a body of people who are thinking in terms of it's going to cut into their profit, and they won't
mm,
have, and they're powerful and they're strong, and we've all felt completely um, devastated by how powerful their forces can be put to use against any progression. So
mhm,
people find places to live, and then something happens and they can't stay there. People get jobs and they're made redundant, or they're put on 0 hours contracts. It just goes on and on, vicious circle.
mm,
Because my parents were stateless and my partner was stateless, I'm particularly linked to the community of people who aren't living and can have never been able to go home to where they originated. And it's not like the people who wake up one morning and say, I think I'd like to go somewhere else. These are people who were expelled and they were not allowed to go home ever. And in the case of my mother, her home no longer existed. It was annexed to a different country that she had no access to. In the case of my father, his country changed governments dramatically. His part of the country changed dramatically, and he was just told he was persona non grata and he was never allowed back. So this is my mother and father, and my partner was expelled under military dictatorship, which we think in the whole big picture of asylum and immigration, being thrown out of the one place that you wanted to stay. He didn't want to travel. He didn't fancy crossing the seas for adventures. He loved his country. He was
Where he lived.
devoted to his family and his country. He was in a level of sort of postgraduate education. He had jobs. Everything was ticking along. Military dictatorship, largely funded by the U.S. At that time. Why? Because the democratically elected president nationalized the copper industry. Copper at that time was the of great value to the United States, and they weren't having it. So they funded a coup. The coup killed thousands of people, disappeared thousands of people, and it expelled people. So we're way on from that. Lots of people don't know that story, but that's the story we've lived, where my partner was completely ever able to think that he could ever have his old life back. But we've made a life, and that's possibly what, when you say what's driving me, what has sparked me to feel enthusiasm for continuing to work for change. Well, things like that, because my mother and father met in a concentration camp. They had everything taken away from them. The parents were gassed. My partner thrown out of his country. We've made a life, and that is not because we're clever or exceptional. It's because that's the way the dice have rolled. We're extremely lucky, and now that we can draw breath because we're not rushing around chasing our tails, we can say, isn't that phenomenal? Whoever would have thought it? I live in a little terraced house now. I've never lived in a house before. I've always been in rented flats. So even that, I sort
Wow,
of get up in the
accomplishment.
morning and think, oh my goodness, I live in a little terraced house.
Yeah.
One of my kids once said, is it disappointing that we're not as engaged in things as you are? And I said, oh, I have no idea how I would start if I were your age. Would I save a whale, hug a tree,
Mm.
break down the man, do die-ins in the street? It's really complicated. I don't think it was ever as simple as I'm suggesting in the 60s, but it
Okay.
felt simple. It felt
Mhm.
like there were good guys and bad guys, and you aligned yourself with one or the other. And as trends and issues and campaigns moved on, again, yes, we knew some of our campaigns were infiltrated with people, but I wasn't a victim of the police spying the way some people were, and they actually fell in love with people and had babies and things. There's shocking things that happen. My foster father suffered from depression, and he was under psychiatric care in the same hospital that I was born in. And only well after he died, and that was really sad for me because he was just a very special person in my life. And we learned so much decades later, when Official Secrets Act and all these papers came free. His psychiatrist had worked for this, was under the employ and payment of the CIA to work in French Canada to test brainwashing techniques. So what he did was he electric shock treatment people until they lost their minds, and they were sent home incontinent with no memory, unable to care for themselves, and then he sent bills for thousands of dollars. And that happened in the early 60s. Isn't that shocking? So even people who live what they think of as very calm lives in a place like Canada, which, as you know, doesn't have the gun problems, and now they have problems, but they used to be a kind of a laughing stock at being so bland. Even Canada had skullduggery going on.
Wow. I've never heard anything of that nature.
So
That,
many people now have written about it. It's very uplifting to me to have lived long enough, because at different times in my life, if my life had ended there, I would never have had the satisfaction of seeing some of these things. My partner can never have satisfaction for all the people he lost, but he has been able to give testimony to ongoing legal things. Like that are really important, because, as I said, you cannot get the child's image of justice. The bad guys will pay. But you can see a process that at least allows people to give their testimony, because even that
yes.
wasn't allowed.
Mm,
And we see it in lots of different spheres, and everybody has something to say. Everybody has a story,
yeah.
and sometimes that story changes things for other people.
100%. 100%.
And what we're
Um,
concerned about now is how little hope. So what we would want you at your
mm,
age, in a country where you have a vote and it's going in for a general election, we'd want one of those people that are looking for your vote to give you hope for the future.
mm,
And that's what's missing, as well as humor. When I joined politics, there was all kinds of wit, because it was the only way we could do it. Otherwise, it's just so grim and relentless, and you can become so easily obsessed. And I'm just not hearing and finding it now. It's I have to really spend a lot of time. And that's what's inspired me in my life. If I were to pin it down to one thing, it's somebody who gets what's going on, but has a sense of humor about it.
okay, I see. I think humor is important, isn't it? Because it does break down a lot of the tension surrounding some of these very serious issues and topics.
People can get so fixated, they get so lost
Mm.
in things that aren't going to get better with the snap of fingers. They're not going to be sorted in my lifetime. So you've just got to have a way where you can take some of the heat out of it. Otherwise, you're just enraged all the time. You just,
Yeah, yeah.
every time you
Breaking
read
up
a
a little bit.
newspaper headline, every time you catch something, how, how bad
Yeah.
can it get? How could anybody do that? Where's the humanity?
Hmm. Absolutely. Can you describe a time when you took a significant risk? I know you said that you would take risks intentionally sometimes because you knew sort of the privilege that you had. So, but can you describe a time when you took a significant risk and what was the outcome of that risk that you took and what did you learn from taking that risk?
Well, I hitchhiked a lot. Uh,
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
I think I tried to calculate once, I don't know, like 35,000 miles or something. So I hitchhiked an awful lot. And at one point in my traveling solo, I started to get very run down physically, because I didn't ever used to bother with looking after myself in any way. So I could feel that I was just not in good shape. And I thought I would go to a country where I knew I could get like fresh fruit and vegetables and sort of healthy outdoor stuff. And I could even access some medical help if I needed it. And I wasn't sure what was going on with me. And I got there, and the war broke out a week later. And and and
Wow.
so talk about a risk. And so the looking back on that, well, that is an education in itself. Nothing can prepare you. Nothing you read or watch or hear can quite replicate the impact and insanity of a war. Everything gets turned upside down. Um, but for me, who was not harmed, and was able to feel that they were doing whatever they could under the circumstances, it was just one of those phenomenal experiences. But I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And
No.
obviously, for me to come out unscathed, an awful lot of people didn't.
Did you know what you were walking into in terms of, did you know that there was an element that of risk in terms of like what could potentially happen?
It was
Or
a
we,
conflict zone, but nothing had happened for the past 6 years. And
okay.
what had happened 6 years before, uh, people people. I mean, what do I mean by people? The general view that was expressed in verbally and in writing was that that had been so horrific that there wouldn't be another one. I mean, that's what people said after the First World War. It won't happen again. Then we had the Second World War. So it's a little bit like that. The aftermath of a conflagration so powerful and detrimental to everything and everybody. Sometimes there's this conclusion formed with no logic because it doesn't reflect the reality of the many years of civilization that we now have information on that we can look back on. But it gives people this illusion and hope that that's it. That won't happen again. The people have learned that's just gets us nowhere. That's awful. But they forget that the arms industry is always very happy because it's great for business to have a war.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
there's a lot more wars now. You do know that for people from my cultural background and ethnic background, the whole concept of the concentration camps was never again. Well, that's baloney, isn't it? There's been so many things that have been as devastating to populations, whether we talk about Rwanda or we could go down many roads with that one. So the wars haven't stopped, they've increased. They're numerous. Some of them we don't care about here. We don't read about the Congo every day. We're only just finding out that Sudan and so on. So we're kind of on the back foot. But this particular country and this particular war, yes, people were still under the a cloud of no, it's 6 years ago. Nothing can happen this soon. Everybody understood that that didn't take us anywhere at all. That wasn't progress. And I had made friends with somebody who was very, very cynical in the community I was staying in, very cynical. And it made me laugh because he was just has such a black humor. And he kept saying, listen, I'm just gotten out of military service, so they'll probably declare war before I can actually change into civvy clothes. And saying, oh my gosh, can you not take it down a notch? You are the ultimate albatross of doom. And it happened. It happened the same day. He said, do you hear that? Do I hear it? I said, yeah, I hear something. He said, that's the war starting. Let's find a radio somewhere in the community, and war will be declared within an hour.
My goodness.
So there were many moments in that particular place. We had bunkers, and when a certain siren went off, we were to run across the fields and go to the nearest bunker. And this is a true story, but it sounds really preposterous and ridiculous, and it kind of shows you that even in war you can be silly. I went down into the bunker, and there was a group of Swiss. They were very anxious and very nervous. And they had a sort of a group leader. And the group leader said, I know what will help us. I know what will calm us down. Let's yodel. And I went to the hatch and I started climbing up the ladder to come out of the bunker. And somebody sort of grabbed my foot and said, where are you going? What are you doing? The siren the all clear hasn't sounded yet. I said, well, I think at that point I was 19. I said, well, I'm 19 years old. I've been working, I've been traveling after myself. I'm making an informed adult decision that I'd rather take my chances out there than with the yodeling.
You didn't want to yodel. No.
I couldn't to be in a confined space. I mean, you've got to have your own peculiar opinions. That's what identifies you. So I said at one point, I'm gonna do this yoga if it kills me. And I'm going to write a short story saying my yoga teacher's trying to kill me, but I'm going to do this yoga. And of course, I'm suddenly going to become this mellow, embracing, kind and gentle person. No way. Yoga pisses me off just as much as everybody and everything else. Because doing what I do doesn't mean you love everybody. It just means you recognize that you're one of them.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you love everybody. I love that. I love that. Wow, you got out and you were more willing to put yourself at risk out there than endure the yodeling.
Totally.
Mm. After everything, what legacy would you hope to leave behind, and how would you want to be remembered?
Well, I'm furious that Buffy got the epitaph. She saved the world a lot because I was really aiming for that.
Okay.
Except then I
Yeah.
remembered that I don't want a funeral and I don't want to have these stones and memorials and burials and all the rest of it. So that's not going to work because basically I'm getting them to either find a new ecological way of dumping me, or just torching me and sneezing my over somewhere that's legal, because that turns out things like that are now really complicated as well. So all those
Oh, wow.
romantic things you see in the films just don't work anymore. But a legacy, uh, I don't worry about. The world is changing all the time. It may be that the things that I care about are not part of the future. It may be that my children's children go off in directions that I would find really hard to relate to. So my legacy is that I tried, I listened, and I didn't give up.
I love that. I love that. I tried, I listened, and I didn't give up. I'm very determined to do certain things that I'm really interested in and that I really like, but giving up, I think, is definitely something to live by. Don't give up too easy. I love that. And
Well, Tina, I mean, the fact that you're doing this and keeping your warm embrace open to having people talk about their distinctive experiences in life patterns is in itself just huge. Because remember, that's not a space, especially as you get older, that people we are seen as done and dusted. We're not very often invited to share. We also have an experience where when we're amongst certain groups of younger people, they just roll their eyes if we try and give an opinion or a comment on something. So we are not the wise elders that are cherished. We're not in that kind of society at the moment. It might change again, but at the moment we're not revered. We're not considered to have any real purpose or use at all. And we're resented because we get a state pension, which is triple locked and therefore better than what you will have or your children will have when time comes. So it is bizarre, and we did benefit. If we were in the UK during those years where you got high interest and you could find a place to live and so on. At the same time, um, it's it's really sad to think that what we wanted was to give all of you the choices we had to express yourself and identify yourself as you chose, not as something imposed on you. And that doesn't really seem to have gone smoothly.
yeah,
It's still, how is it possible, 2024, that racism is still
mm,
so uh her just nightmare, can't get to the bottom of it. How is it that trafficking and slavery is greater than any other time in human history? How is that possible? So here
yeah,
we are, civilized, evolved, developed, technology, all the rest of it. To what end? So
mm,
those challenges, I think, are so much harsher for you because
mm,
we really thought things were going to be different. And
mm,
that carried us through all kinds of things. In my case, things didn't happen directly to me that were harmful. I mean, even when I was held up with a gun, even when I was held up with a knife, even when I hitchhiked with some very leery, suspect people, they didn't harm me. And that has to be acknowledged because other people have been minding their own business and they're hurt by something or somebody, and they can be traumatized as a result of that. Was able to have healthy babies when I wanted. I'd had so many jobs, and again, don't envy anybody just starting now in the job market. It's not like it was. I used to go to a new country and give myself 7 days, and if I had a job at the end of 7 days, I'd stay for a while, and if not, I'd just move on to the next country. Didn't need
wow.
papers, didn't need to jump through hoops, didn't need a CV, didn't need to go through 20 interviews, and be scrutinized on everything. And so that sense of the world was my oyster. But the other thing was I had no expectations. And Tina, if I were to say something about your cohort, I would say that some of them that I meet, when I'm doing my little dabble in supporting artist work, scare the living daylights out of me because they feel entitled and they'll say, I'm not putting up with this. This isn't good enough. They can't treat me like that. I'm kind of going, well, yeah, they can. And they just did. And
Mm.
that's been my whole life. I mean, of course, I cleaned toilets. Of course, I was pawed by my employers. Of course, I was not paid by some jobs, and that was what it was like. What would make you think, no, 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 and I have to have this, and I need that, and I'm not working under these conditions. So I also a trade unionist. I'm still a trade unionist, but I was a strongly involved in the trade unions and stuff. And that was scary as well, because when I represented people, Tina, younger people who said, no, 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 I want this, I want that, I'm kind of going, that's not what's on the table. That I'm
Mm,
so
yeah.
sorry. I can't magic that for you. We have to ask something that's reasonable. And your idea of what you're entitled to is unfortunately so sorry. In employment law and workers can, it's not reasonable. So in
Mm,
some ways I was kind of um, amused by them because they were so confident. In another way, it didn't work.
yeah.
That's not, it's brashness and it's assumptions. And it's the same with, like, now that I live in a house, of course, up and down the street, there's young people buying really expensive houses. I'm kind of going, oh, because as I say, we're in our 70s and it's my very first house.
Yeah. Wow, it's your first house in your 70s. I know you said that you rented, didn't you, prior? So this is your
Oh,
first
I
house.
didn't have a washing machine till my fourth child in Terry nappies was 6 months old. And then I still sometimes I have a washing machine now and I don't never had a dryer. And I go past it and I just get kind of mesmerized because it
Yeah.
does the work for me because I bent over bathtubs and did the hard. We didn't have a fridge, we didn't have curtains, we didn't have this and we didn't have that. We did have mold, we did have vermin, we did have so we just didn't expect anything. That's one of my partner and I are chalk and cheese, but we've managed 49 years together without wanting to stomp each other to death more than once or twice a day. And that's the one thing that we shared was it just didn't occur to us when we woke up in the morning that things should be this way and
Mm,
we should be able to go into this room and this should happen all the rest of it. So apparently that's an unusual mindset. Apparently most people think, well, I'm X age and I should have this by now and I should do this and somebody's cheated me if I don't have this and this, and if I go to a job and they ask me to do this, that's not my job, that's not what I applied for. So that idea of mucking in, putting up with things and being bossed around is quite interesting because I'm not saying it's a good thing.
mhm.
I'm just saying that was what our lives were like, and we didn't think that was the battlefield to die on. We just thought that was not a whole barrel of laughs, but it could be tolerated because it wasn't the important stuff.
Of course. I do think that my generation and younger do have a bigger sense of entitlement. But something that you said that really stuck out was about you owning your own house only now. I feel like a lot of people feel as though owning their own house is important, but it seems like that was never important to you.
It
And
never occurred to me that it was a possibility, so I didn't spend a lot of time wishing and hoping and dreaming and fantasizing.
I
Uh,
see.
and that's pretty much a characteristic of quite a lot of people who come from other um, worlds and they end up here. Is
Mhm.
I was in on a conversation where people were talking about inheriting, and yes, well, I expect to inherit this, and I was kind of like, oh, because again, my partner and I chalk and cheese, different worlds, different passions, different study areas, different work areas, but the one thing we share is, of course, we were never in line to inherit a penny from anybody. We were lucky that they died before they went into severe debt, which would have landed on us. So things like that are really still, we've been here a long time and it's still really alien to us. Sometimes I have to go, well, I speak English, but I really don't understand what people are saying. I
Yeah,
don't know what they mean. I get the
yeah,
words, and
yeah.
sometimes my partner will ask me, what does that mean? I said, do you want me to tell you what the words technically mean, or do you want me to tell you what I think the intention is behind that combination of words? So quite a few of us from outer space that are on your planet for the foreseeable future are still flabbergasted by that. And I also am saying that remember the fact that we now have a little terraced house. My father died in a rented flat in his 90s, and nobody ever had anything. But we've made it impossible for all the rest of you to buy houses.
Hmm. Hmm.
We've screwed
Yeah.
up, we've screwed up the economy. We've destroyed the climate. We've usurped all the energy. So by the time you pay your water bill, your electricity bill, your gas bill, and your transport bill, you certainly can't go around bidding on houses in London.
No,
I
absolutely.
have I could move to London when lots of my friends wanted to because their children and friends were also down south, and it's fabulous in Scotland. Oh, we were so lucky there. We had such a great life. But when people are no longer there, you have to think about, well, I've only got X number of years left. Where am I going to be? Is it easy for the kids to come up all the time if things are calling on us all to be together? But we had real luck because we're therefore a family of 6 adults and everybody pools money. So when we decided with the kids we would move to London, they're not the only reason, but they're part of the reason. We wanted to shake it up because when you're retired, you can get a bit complacent and into a rut and routine. And we loved our routine in Glasgow, but we were just going to keep doing it. And so with kids, we talked about moving to London, and everybody pooled everything. We could
Oh,
never have done it on our own. So that's 6 adults who've worked all their days pooling, and that made it possible. But you won't have that option.
I couldn't believe when I was talking to an older man, I think he was in his 70s, 80s as well. I couldn't believe how much it was to buy a house back. He must have said it was something like £1,000. I couldn't believe it. I said if he'd have known, he would have bought four. It wouldn't, that will never happen in this day and age ever
No.
again. And it's so tough to get on the market. It really is. It really is. I mean, I
And if
don't.
I could have stopped a legislation, there's so many things that I wish the people power and the
Mm,
trades and labor movement, who were strong then. I mean, when I joined my union, it was 2.2 million people just in this one union, and now it's a super union with about 16 different unions involved, and it's only over 1 million members. So bear in mind, I'm talking about a time where workers' power counted for something. And so amongst the sort of big moments where I thought, well, we've lost something that really matters, as opposed, yeah, we lose again, we'll just keep going back and fighting the same fight. But the selling of council houses was utterly catastrophic for
mm,
housing in the UK and for people of your generation. And the other one was the gradual destruction of the trade unions by taking away the secondary right to strike, by taking this away, by taking that away. The miners' strike was huge. I was in Sheffield at the time. We're very close to the people involved, and oh boy, we lost that in a way that has repercussions now.
mhm,
And
mhm,
those are just two. There's others, but those are privatization, and the other is the PPI initiative, where people enter into deals, like hospitals enter into deals with private contractors who lease them the land, and they just keep putting the money up and so on. So these things are out of control from your perspective, and it would be really ugly if someone in my age and comfort bracket said, yeah, well, you just have to get on like we did. We didn't have to get on
mhm.
against these odds.
Okay, yeah. So are you saying it's a
Your
little bit
game is
tougher?
rigged. Your game is rigged.
Yeah.
Ours had restrictions, limitations, and rules we didn't necessarily like, but it wasn't rigged. That's my
Oh,
current that's my current snap
okay. Mm.
perspective.
That is a very powerful and true perspective. Yeah.
The water companies, when I came, the railroads were nationalized, the water was nationalized, the gas was nationalized, the electricity was nationalized, the telecommunications was nationalized, etc. So can
Mm.
you imagine in this time that I've ended up by accident in the UK to now. And that's what I mean about the game is rigged. Of course, it was never perfect. It was never a perfect system, but it was a whole different world
Different.
when it was nationalized. And
Mm,
now look at the water companies. Look at just you just name scandal after scandal after scandal.
mm. But is that quite difficult for you to look at and see, like how, because you're so passionate about, equal rights and, is that quite difficult for you to?
It's broken some of my friends' spirits, and they have stepped away from the political and campaigning arena. And there's nothing I can conclude from that. They still want to be friends with me, so that's a good thing. And sometimes they don't want to hear, and sometimes they do want to hear how we're getting on.
Mhm.
I'm still a member of the political party I joined 40 something years ago. I'm still a member of the trade union I joined 40 something years ago. Both of those have become institutionalized in a way that's betrayed a lot of things you and I have been talking about. And they've certainly not been very fond of people like me, and they've gotten rid of quite a lot of people like me, but I just hang in there for dear life. I don't go until I'm shoved out the door. I don't leave things. It's just a bit of stubbornness. So of course it's very sad. We fall back on those of us who stay active. We fall back on an understanding that we're not alone, that we're not going to see the world change in so many of the ways that we had aimed for. But it doesn't mean it will stay the same. It might need to get worse before it gets better. And that things are a cycle. And I never thought I'd be around this long to see this many aspects of the cycle. I thought my time would be cut short ages ago. So that's
Mhm.
kind of a, a tragic and fascinating at the same time,
Mm.
and inevitable in many ways. And at the moment, money is what it's all about. And just not that interested in money. It sounds like you're not that interested in money, but unfortunately, that makes us a minority.
Just interesting to hear the different perspectives that you've had on many of the different topics that we've spoken about. You also mentioned that you were held up at gunpoint and with a knife as well.
The gun was I was still in secondary school, and I was homesick, and in the rented flat that my father had. And it was flats in a big block, and a the inner door rang because we had an outer door, but somebody who was inner door. So I assumed it was either a neighbor or somebody who'd been permitted entry into the building. And when I opened the door, a man said, "Is your husband home? I'm from the Canadian Book Company." And I said, "No, no, he's not. He's at work." I mean, I was, I was 14 or something, but I said, "No, he's," as I say, I was tall. And
Yeah.
he said, "No, he's at work." And then he tried to step forward, and he held a gun to me, um, and said, "We'll just go inside." And I was kind of really angry, which isn't apparently the first reaction most people have. So I slammed the door in his face, locked it, and called the person. I think we referred to him as the janitor, who was supposed to be dealing with strangers in the building. And then I called the police. And what happened was, at that time, I had my lovely foster mother, who's very, very sweet, very Canadian, very nervous person, the opposite of me. And she had a job just along the road, and used to sometimes come past with her girlfriends from the office to have lunch. And she saw a whole bunch of police cars pulled up in front of our apartment block. And she said to one of the girls, said, "Oh no, little Vicky's homesick. I hope she's not distressed by the sound of these police cars."
Yeah,
And
yeah. Not
she
realizing. Yeah.
she came upstairs, and one of the policemen was talking to me, and I was giving descriptions and everything. And she came, and she leaned on the wall just outside the door, because he was blocking the doorway. And she seemed to be about to faint. So the police said, "Oh, so I'm so sorry, madam. Should I be talking to you instead of this little girl?" And I was like, "No," I said.
No, it's me.
You
Yeah.
can't, yeah, like this. And the same thing happened. We did a lineup. They found the guy and they did a lineup, and we got to the lineup. It was a really sad story because what he'd been doing was raping women because they stepped backwards. He'd held the gun to them and he took them inside and raped them. And
Wow.
police
So
made a big
you,
fuss of me in front of these horribly hurt women, these women who'd suffered this shocking crime in their own home. And the police made this big fuss about me. Oh, see this little girl, she just pushed him out the door. That's not how these things happen. It just happened. That's what it triggered in
yeah,
me. Like, I'm not letting him mess up my day and come into my father's flat. So it just happened. And I don't push people, I don't hit people and all the rest. It's just one of those things. Could have gone anyway. But they made the women feel really bad, and that made me utterly disgusted by that sort of macho attitude. So we went into the lineup, and my poor foster mother by this time was in such a state of semi-hysteria that as soon as they lifted the screen, she said, "That's him, I'd know him anywhere." And again, the police that were there said, "I'm so sorry, madam, but I don't think I'd appreciated that you'd seen him." She said, "I didn't. It's just she described him so well."
yeah, yeah. I
And
know it's
I went to court. I was just on my own with four really cretinous policemen. I mean, some policemen, of course, are decent and able, but not all of them. So this is the old days, and these were like man mountains of thickness. They were just I don't talk like this. And I had to sit with them out in the corridor for 4 hours. And then someone came along and said, "Trial is adjourned. It's over." And I said, "It's over? I have been sitting here for 4 hours practicing my j'accuse." This
yeah.
is in French Canada, j'accuse. And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Are you allowed to tell me why? How? I mean, I'm here as a witness."
Mhm.
And they said, "Yeah, he's from a really wealthy family and they paid for him to go to a mental institution for psychiatric
No.
evaluation." So as I say, when we talk about justice, we can aim high, but we also have to recognize how the world works.
Yeah, yeah. That is so frustrating. That is so frustrating. There's no justice there, was there? Absolutely nothing at all. Wow. And you genuinely escaped what could have been a very terrible situation.
Oh yeah,
And you,
for me at
I,
that stage, I was a tad on the innocent side when it came to those kinds of things. So yeah, that would have been a big blow. So that's to say, that's what life is. It's a series of escapades that you either
I,
skate over or they catch you, and
yeah.
it's just still um, really poor use of language and emotions when adults make people think it's their fault somehow, that they brought it on themselves, or they
Mm.
must have done something when it's just so happenstance. So much of life is random. I mean, how did I end up being a Transylvanian, Slovakian child from a cancer family with an Aymara Chilean partner and living in England?
Yeah,
Nothing
yeah,
makes
yeah,
sense. Nothing
yeah.
makes sense and everything makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's a weird paradox, isn't it? I think that it's a little bit of this, and you're right. It's sometimes there's nothing that you can do to will it or not will it. Sometimes things just happen.
Exactly. My mother was dead at the age of 34 with cancer. And I've had
Mm.
a straight run with cancer, no problem. I've had exactly the same cancer she did, but I had good treatment and good recovery. So
Wow.
lots of all the family had all her surviving family have it,
Mhm.
and some have died, and I'm nowhere near dead. They're going to have to try a lot harder next time.
Yeah, your philosophy of don't give up is exactly what you live through and you embody because clearly, all the things that we've spoken about, the running thread through it is just, I can feel that you're not giving up. You're not giving up. You know, they might not want you, but I'm attending, I'm going. There's just no giving up. That's why, because you have that philosophy. I like it and I am going to try and well, I don't like to use that word try. Um, I'm going to,
Don't
take that
sue
up.
me. I'm not worth much.
No, no, but it's a great mindset to have, and I think that just listening to you, sometimes I do it too easy. What is one piece of advice that you would like to give somebody of, I'm not going to say my generation, but for younger people? What's one piece of advice? It could be about anything as well. Just one piece of advice that you'd like to give.
Well, I haven't thought about this before, so this is off the top of my head, but
Okay.
expect nothing, appreciate everything, and keep your manners. Use them.
Brilliant. Love that. Thank you very much, Vicky. Thank you for listening. And if you did like the episode, please give it a like and share. And I will be back next week with another episode on the How We Rise podcast.